What is going on, guys? I want to talk about the effects of compound interest from a different light. So, when we look at compound interest, a lot of people look at that and they say, oh, yeah, I understand compound interest. I totally get the mindset. And so they might be looking at their investments and just seeing, maybe a 3% return, or they might see a 4 or 5%, just on average, year over year. And maybe they're paying a large fee to have that fund managed. So maybe they're paying 1%, 2%, 3%. They don't understand how that affects their returns in the long run. And sure, mutual funds are great. I totally think that they're fantastic for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. Going and talking to a professional is by far the best level of return statistically than going it independently. And there's lots of papers that have looked at those statistics and been able to find that to be quite true. Again, you're going to find lots of information out there, but that seems to be the common thread. But let's think about this for a second. Let's talk about compound interest. So let's say somebody decided, you know what, I'm actually going to start doing this. I want to be able to learn how to invest, and I want to be able to get some of the basics and see if I can just like uncouple myself from having to pay those kinds of fees. Well, if you look at the return and you look at it over the course of maybe a year or 2 years, we don't really think that that's a significant amount of a difference. But when you look at it over the course of something like 30 years, it has a large effect. Now, when you start getting into higher levels of interest, it becomes even more so the case. And that's because the investment itself, percentage wise, builds upon itself. And so those larger percentages have a lot more weight and a lot more of an effect on the underlying type of or your underlying money. So if I was to look at, just as an example, and this is a drastic example, but it's a fairly good example actually. If you take something like the S&P 500, where you have anywhere from 8 to 12%, say, on average, for a return. Let's say we do 10%. Over the course of 30 years, you're looking at relatively about 200,000 in regards to what your return could be if you invested, say, like 10,000 into it. But if you were to look at, say, investing that same 10,000 at, let's say, 20%, and again, that's a huge number. Somebody like Warren Buffett, who had, if you look at a lot of his past performance, even more so in his earlier years than more recent years, the return against the market, that 10% that you get in the market versus what Warren Buffett had around that 20%, is a significant difference. And so if you were to look at $10,000, you invest that over the course of 30 years, you're looking at about $3 million, give or take. Like, or sorry, $3.8 million. So that is a huge difference. That is a drastic difference in regards to the returns. And, when you look at the percentage, you're like, oh yeah, 10% to 20%, it's just double the interest, but you don't, it's how the compounding effect takes place. So when we look at those 1%, 2%, 3%, those percentage points are a significant difference. And so as a self-investor myself, I'm looking at ways to have healthy, balanced portfolios. But at the same time, if I can just push out an extra 0.5% of a return, for the next guy, he might not look at that and go, oh, wow, that's nothing. You know what I mean? But for someone like myself, because I'm looking at it in the perspective of how compounding works, I'm actually looking at that and getting excited over those small incremental percentage differences. And so that's one thing I want to just talk about today, was just that compound interest effect. And so we're going to get into a lot more details and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to chat with you in future episodes.